All right, and so for our next session, we're excited to welcome Jennifer and Siobhan, who are here with Carolinian Canada, uh, to do their presentation on a seed strategy rooted in ethical space. So I'd like to welcome both of you. I'll begin by introducing you, Jennifer. So Jennifer Nantais helps foster connections between science, community, and business for an equitable, sustainable future in the spirit and practice of reconciliation. As the program specialist, she works to protect and promote healthy ecosystems and track it. All right, we're excited to welcome today for our next presentation, Jennifer and Siobhan from Carolinian Canada. Jennifer Nantais helps foster connections between science, community, and business for an equitable, sustainable future in the spirit and practice of reconciliation. As the program specialist, she works to protect and promote healthy ecosystems and track impact through the In the Zone program, strategize to preserve native plants and seeds through the Southern Ontario Seed Strategy, and help lead the way in a restoration economy through the award-winning Conservation Impact Bond. Her work seeks to strengthen relationships between native plants, biodiversity, the land, and each other. Welcome, Jennifer. Siobhan is passionate about creating positive systemic change for people and ecosystems in an equitable way. As the network specialist with Carolinian Canada, she delivers strategic communications and outreach to connect the network to Carolinian Canada's initiatives, including the Southern Ontario Seed Strategy, Conservation Impact Bond, and In the Zone. Drawing from experiences in environmental communications, ecology, outdoor education, and research, she aims to use her interdisciplinary background to inspire and connect groups around shared goals in nature. So welcome the both of you. We're super excited to have you here today, and I'll pass it over to you.
To share here at Carolinian Canada. I'm going to start by turning it over to Siobhan, our network specialist. She is going to talk a bit about the recently released Native Plant Economy Report. Then I'm going to talk about the Southern Ontario Seed Strategy itself, and then we're going to turn it back over to Siobhan again to talk about one of the wonderful tools that came out of this process, the Seed Saver tool, to help identify and connect some existing and potential native seed sources. So on that note, I'll turn it over to Siobhan.
Thanks, Jen. And hi, everyone. So my name's Siobhan Mullally, and like Rachel said when in her lovely introduction of both of us, I'm the network specialist with Carolinian Canada. So in my role, I've been a part of the Southern Ontario Seed Strategy team, so helping kind of facilitate those collective meetings as well as the strategy process and connecting all that work to our comm strategy. And another big thing that I've worked on is the Economy of Hope report, which I'm going to talk about now. So this is a new report we just launched last week called the Economy of Hope, Growing Healthy Landscapes in the Greater Golden Horseshoe in Partnership with Native Plants. And this report was created from research that Carolinian Canada started in about 2021. In partnership with the Greenbelt Foundation and other organizations in the Southern Ontario Nature Coalition group as well. So we were given the opportunity, sorry, could you go back to the other slide?
Sorry, Siobhan.
That's okay, thanks. So yeah, we were given the opportunity to look at the status of the native plant industry in this region, as well as challenges and key opportunities to scale the industry as well. So there's 15 recommendations coming out of this report. And another key focus of the report is how all of this work is aligning with government priorities as well. So embedded in one of the recommendations are lists of recommended policies and actions for different levels of government as well. So this research was led by my colleague Sarah Winterton, who developed a native plant economy survey online, and then also conducted interviews with native plant growers and users or distributors, so including municipalities, conservation authorities, and other not-for-profit groups as well. And I'll just preface also by saying that there's not a lot of data out there currently about the native plant industry as a whole. And so of all the data that is collected by Statistics Canada on the horticulture industry and the sector in Ontario, native plants aren't identified or measured in any of that. So our team was faced with a lot of gaps while doing this research. And so the voices from the survey and the interviews were really key to building this foundation and hopefully building more research kind of coming out of this as well. So there were 73 participants total, which included about half the growers in the GGH region. And the responses captured perspectives of many groups in the sector, as you can see on the slide. And although the GGH was the primary focus area of the report, 81% of respondents said they operate across Southern Ontario. So a lot of the findings that I'll speak to today and that you can find in the report can generally be applied to the entire region of Southern Ontario. And our recommendations definitely go beyond the GGH as well. So I'll speak to a bit of the background of the report, and then I'll jump into some key findings. So next slide. So one of the goals of this research and of the Southern Ontario seed strategy work as well is to create ethical space in the native plant sector. And this is to center and respect Indigenous relationships to native plants, to support Indigenous goals, advance economic reconciliation, and respect Indigenous leadership, all while recognizing that Indigenous communities are significant stewards of remaining biodiversity and have been since time immemorial. So this report includes a focus on some of the colonial barriers and policies to Indigenous participation in the sector, to address those. Also current examples of Indigenous participation and different stories of leadership and success, and reflections of different Indigenous perspectives as well. And this part of the research was led by Verlin James and supported by Sam Wide-Eye, who both work on the Indigenous leadership pillar of Carolinian Canada. And another key focus of the report is how all of these different producers and users and distributors are connected and working within a market. So we broke it down into 3 key markets in this report. So the first one being the bulk market for green infrastructure and for restoration. And then also the retail market, which is focused on individuals planting on their own properties and gardens. And the specialty market, which is focused on protecting and conserving rare plants and species at risk. And so thinking about these markets, we kind of thought through how they contribute to the broader goal of 50% of the landscape as healthy habitat. And so these goals are explained further in the report, but this table pulled from the report kind of shows just some examples of short-term goals, and then also related bigger picture goals to achieving these large targets connected to different government priorities, like the 30 by 30 goal. And so of the respondents, 30% of them identify as producers and 70% as users and or distributors of native plant and seed. And we asked them what areas of work they were involved in. So you can see in the tables there, in the top table of the top 5 activities, there's a lot of overlap in what these groups are doing. So we're seeing that a lot of people in the sector are filling several different roles and contributing to the sector in different ways. So because of that, we were able to identify 27 subcategories that are more specific to help us understand some of the activities and roles that groups are taking on and where all that overlap is happening. So if you're looking at the top 5 activities, these activities really show getting seed and plants out on the land. So stewardship and seeding and planting and seed collection, as well as education. And the lowest activities that groups identified were, these show some gaps in the sectors. So we're paying attention to these to see kind of where certain gaps can be addressed and supported. And so looking at the experience of growers and users and distributors was also really interesting to us. So we can see here in the results that there's a wealth of experience in the sector already, with 75% of nurseries having 10 plus years of experience growing native plants, and 50% of growers having 20 plus years. So that's a lot of experience there. And 94% of producers are growing 80 to 100% native plants, and 78% of users, distributors work with 80% or higher of native plants. So I'm going to quickly go through some of our key highlights from the report on a couple slides, but the report really does have a lot more information that reflects different voices from the survey and a lot more detail in the research. So please dig deeper into the report if there's anything that interests you and you want to learn more. And we're going to share the link in a couple of slides as well. So yeah, going into the research, we knew that the demand for native plants was increasing, and the survey responses reflected that over half the participants can't meet this current demand in their work. And you can see in the table to the right the main trends driving this demand. So it's very driven by consumer awareness and also by larger scale projects for restoration, NGO programs, green infrastructure, and landscaping. Also, 44% of growers are operating at a micro business level, which is 1 to 4 employees. And this stat is double what the larger horticulture industry operates at. So native plant growers are operating on a smaller scale generally. 59% of participants report problems sourcing seed and plants in the species, quantity, and size they need. And 75% of growers said they have unused production capacity. And the reasons for that capacity being unused, despite growing demand, include a whole suite of challenges that growers are facing. But some of those challenges include inconsistent and uncertain demand and supply, and insufficient forecasting and lead time to grow desired plants. But it's great that there is existing capacity for seed orchards, for seed storage and testing in the sector that could be utilized with further coordination and support. And 85% of participants follow voluntary standards and policies related to sourcing native plants and seed. And so looking forward, 94% of participants think the industry should expand capacity, 71% plan to increase their work with native plants, and 81% of growers would like to increase specific species or quantities that they're growing with sufficient lead time. So that's all moving in a really positive direction. And 76% of respondents agree that Ontario needs a native seed strategy as well. So Jen's going to talk about the Southern Ontario Seed Strategy next, and kind of its development coming out of and also in parallel with this research that we've been doing. And the strategy will be really key to actioning a lot of the recommendations that are coming out of this report as well. So I'll just conclude this section by letting you know that the report is accessible on our website at that link. So caroliniancanada.ca/seed/economy of hope. And we're also going to be sharing weekly blogs following the report launch from different perspectives in the sector that will dig into more of the key aspects of the report from different perspectives and different voices. So stay tuned for that series coming out soon. And yeah, we hope you enjoy reading the report and digging more into it. And I'll pass it back to you, Jen.
Thanks, Siobhan. During this middle part of the presentation, I'm going to talk about the Southern Ontario Seed Strategy itself, affectionately known by us as the SOS. I'll explain that acronym before I slip into it, intentionally or otherwise. But like Siobhan mentioned, we are members of the SOS team, but we represent a larger collective of individuals, groups, and communities who have come together to develop this strategy. Our role has been to help build and grow this collective and facilitate connection meetings to help gather input from collective members into a strategy that represents the values, needs, and goals of all across Ontario. So I'm going to provide some details on the strategy development, as well as outline kind of the process up until now, where we're at, and where we plan to head next. So this whole process started by centering on the important fact that native plants reside at the intersection of ecology, economy, and ethics. And in order to scale native seed supply in Ontario, a holistic approach was needed that works for everyone and addresses challenges and opportunities across sectors. Participants in the Southern Ontario Nature Coalition identified this need as outlined in a recommendation in the 2021 Urban Nature Network, a solution to climate change and biodiversity loss report, for the creation of a seed strategy for Southern Ontario. So this 2021 recommendation, also the recommendations out of the Native Plant Economy report that Siobhan mentioned, really catapulted us into the next phase of the SOS development, which began with being born out of the need for more native seed for restoration in Southern Ontario. As you know, Southern Ontario is a densely populated region of the country and has seen extensive habitat loss since colonization. To reach healthy habitat levels, like our national targets of 30% natural area coverage by 2030, we really need to double habitat in Southern Ontario. However, the current supply of genetically appropriate and native seeds and plants does not meet the demand of restoration. This means that we must scale up the current capacity to produce more native plant materials and do so in a way that is ethical and sustainable to build resilient relationships and partnerships, and ultimately to build resilient landscapes. The strategy will prioritize actions to grow more native plants, a full diversity of species, and to grow them better for ecological and genetic integrity. Carolinian Canada's role in this strategy, as I said, is as the facilitator. There are many knowledge holders, growers of native plants and seed collectors, ecologists, and experts that are really co-creating the strategy with us and leading the way in this initiative with our team. So to start with, a group of partner organizations came together for the shared purpose of creating a seed strategy for Southern Ontario. As we all know, the idea of a seed strategy is not a new one. You might have heard of other seed strategies in existence already or popping up. There are ones across the globe even. The United States already has one, and Australia. But this group had a vision to create a seed strategy unlike the others they had previously seen. A strategy that is created in ethical space and braids together Indigenous and Western knowledge. And through extensive outreach, the collective began to grow and represent diverse perspectives across the landscape. In order to develop this process that we had envisioned, we really had to rely on our core values. In 2018, Carolinian Canada made a commitment in the strategic plan to include Indigenous leadership, recognizing that Indigenous people have a vital role to play in stewarding the land, but have historically been excluded from many conversations and decisions in the conservation sector. In the Carolinian zone, there are 10 nations that steward some of the most ecologically intact lands in the region, and their voices and knowledge are critical in our path forward together. More recently, Carolinian Canada has established an Indigenous leadership pillar, which has been leading us throughout this learning process. From the beginning of the journey, it was known that a seed strategy for this region needs to be rooted in ethical space, where all knowledge systems are welcome and valued equally, and where Indigenous communities are involved in the discussion from the very beginning and can feel safe to voice their perspectives. So these were really important to us, not to get started on the work as if we can get started without everyone at the table, and to invite folks in for input and connection in midway through the process. We really needed to make sure that all the right stakeholders and right holders were there at the beginning of the process and create that safe space for everyone to work together. And this really opened the door to a seed strategy with a two-eyed seeing approach. Two-eyed seeing refers to learning to see with one eye with the strengths of Indigenous ways of knowing, and from the other eye with the strengths of Western ways of knowing, and using both of these eyes together. Our goal was to produce a strategy that has a two-eyed seeing lens by including both Indigenous knowledge and Western science approaches, with no one knowledge system valued above the other. Other seed strategies have been developed, but many of them don't include Indigenous perspectives. And therefore, the SOS aims to take a different approach, and we are continuously on a learning journey to determine really what a written two-eyed seeing strategy looks like in practice. So we had to establish a collective. So up until now, I've been talking about all of the groundwork that was involved before we even began to establish that collective. So to get all of the people together involved lots and lots of outreach, lots of research to identify stakeholders and rights holders, like I said, all of the relevant folks who should be at that table and welcoming them to that conversation. We were heading on a restoration and healing journey together and wanted to make sure that that relationship was a reciprocal one. So where relationships already exist, strengthen them through this process where we can all benefit together, where relationships needed to be built, reaching out and starting relationships with those folks. And these relationships don't end when the work is done, when the strategy is created. I'll talk about how we're moving into the next phase together and how we try to use that meeting space to provide reciprocity and give back to the folks who are helping us to put this all together. Lots of time, space, and intention was put into exploratory discussions to understand the priorities and approaches needed to do this work together. Communication, consent, and relationships were some common themes that were shared. So this is some of the word clouds that were created through our connections together. And so you know how those work. The larger words are the ones that had a lot more support and that came up a lot more in those connections to each other. So this was really the start of that relationship building process. And many discussions were had to understand the challenges faced by participants and some of the key opportunities that we could tap into. Knowledge sharing, resources, seed sources, and opportunities to scale were some of the common themes. So digging into the challenges that were identified through those collective discussions, some of those included a lack of equitable access to resources and opportunities in the native plant sector, a lack of coordination at a regional and landscape scale, including supply and demand in appropriate timeframes, no wide-scale use of tools to improve coordination and communication, a lack of policies that support the use of native plants. Some policies don't mention native plants at all, and where they were mentioned, there wasn't a lot of mention of, requiring them or even supporting their use and selection. And costs of native plants being prohibitive to users, as well as a lack of capacity building and financial support and investment to assist the scaling of the sector. In addition to the challenges, some of the gaps in Southern Ontario, the supply does not equal the demand for restoration goals. Like I said, a lot of us in the sector know that. A lot of native plant growers and producers know that. But people outside of the sector didn't know that, and they still don't. I mean, even if we had all of the support behind our shared restoration goals, even if we had all of the funds, we don't have the plants. And in order to have enough plants to do that, we need to produce seed. So things that came up include, again, policy, capacity building, seed standards, tools and training, financial support and investment. So a lot of things are kind of recurring and coming up in these different spaces and topics. Through collective discussion and learning, through the SOS and the Economy of Hope report, we have developed goals for the strategy, like expanding ethical space in the sector to assist Indigenous capacity building and support collaboration and partnerships across the sector. Capacity building support for the native plant sector for investment in native plant production and training and mentorship opportunities. Connecting supply and demand by gaining a better understanding of the seed needs and improving communication throughout the supply chain. Development of tools to assist with forecasting, knowledge sharing, and product labeling. Identify focal species for restoration to act quickly for habitat and biodiversity goals. Develop education strategies to increase the understanding and perception of ethically produced source-identified native seed. And identify research and gaps for the sector to be better equipped to act and produce high-quality native seed in the quantities we need. The collective then established a purpose, which included addressing biodiversity loss, building resilience to climate change, safeguarding water and ways of life, sharing knowledge, and protecting genetic diversity to ensure healthy landscapes for 7 generations. The collective started building foundations for this work, which included discussion around ethical spaces and what practices and protocols could be implemented to ensure the establishment and maintenance of ethical and safe space, as well as mapping out the SOS journey, drafting a meeting schedule, and pulling inspiration from colleagues around the world. We also developed terms of reference to guide how we will do this work together. And at the same time, our Indigenous Leadership Director, Sam White-Eye, was leading an Indigenous parallel process to discuss Indigenous relationships to seed and identify the goals and values of Indigenous partners. To date, we have engaged over 70 groups and organizations and over 200 individuals, including 25 Indigenous partners in this process. Participants have engaged in monthly collective meetings where we have covered a wide diversity of topics, including reconciliation, native plant autonomy, ecological and cultural restoration, focal species, and many more. So this was that opportunity for reciprocal learning. These monthly meetings were quite demanding on the times of the SOS collective partners. They were anywhere from an hour or 2 hours to 3 hours, plus additional working group opportunities and connection meetings. So we tried to make sure that we had really knowledgeable speakers, folks sharing knowledge at these meetings, so that not only are we learning to help implement some of this information into the strategy itself, but that people attending these meetings are really learning, helping to support their work, helping to feed their passion for native plants and restoration in the area. In 2023, we really hit the ground running and shared a lot of time together. These collective meetings started late in 2022, but we had meetings all of last year and just wrapped up recently. We covered many topics, including seed orchards and collection areas, forecasting, biodiversity as a foundation for two-eyed seeing, and many more. In September, we had a really important Southern Ontario Seed Strategy meeting update where we kind of showed the collective the framework. It got some critical feedback. In addition, we provided connection exercises because a lot of the knowledge sharing was from experts in the field, a lot of them seeing best from their Western science eye. So we tried to take off kind of that hat and really just connect with each other, connect with the land, connect with the past, connect on the future and our hopes for the future, and the way that native plants impact our life and the lives of all living beings on this land. So those exercises really tried to help us keep that two-eyed seeing lens alive through the whole development process. In addition to collective meetings, we have shared the strategy in many spaces in Canada and beyond. A number of the SOS partners, including Guyana Say, Canadian Wildlife Fund, World Wildlife Fund, and others attended the National Native Seed Strategy Seed Conference in Washington. This was a really great opportunity to see kind of where they were at on the reconciliation journey, how different sectors are a part of the restoration story. They have different, habitats there, lots of coastal projects. It was a really great opportunity to meet people and connect and learn to help inform the strategy development. We had a lot of opportunities, both in person and virtual. We shared the sauce at the RE3 conference in Quebec City. We held virtual webinars, particularly targeted toward municipal and regional governments, provincial governments, to try and, explain how the sauce would support their work and how they can participate in the sauce. The Ecological Farmers Association and Regenerate Grey Bruce, really the National Native Seeds Conference in Washington really kind of opened our eyes to just how big a role the agriculture sector plays in restoration in the United States. Municipal events, conservation authority events, whenever we get the invitation, we're happy to show up and talk about the sauce. We work with academic partners and participate in events with naturalist clubs and garden clubs and more. So we've been out there sharing the sauce, and we're going to continue to do so as we move toward the spring. So now for the strategy itself. So I talked about, the groundwork to establish the collective, how the collective is really the voices of the Southern Ontario Seed Strategy and helping to pull that together. Now we're going to look at what we pulled together and what we're getting ready to share with the world. We developed a vision and mission, the vision being healthy landscapes for all. The mission is to ensure reliable availability of source-identified native seed for restoration to heal the relationships with the land and people in the spirit and practice of truth and reconciliation. We've recently shared our framework, which includes 6 goals, 17 objectives, and 44 actions or recommendations. These have been prioritized as either urgent with the highest priority level, necessary, kind of the mid-range, and beneficial, the lowest rank, to help prioritize which actions we need to concentrate on first, where we need the most support. And collective input and feedback was really important to help shape and refine these goals, objectives, and actions. Some of the urgent actions that we can take a look at include actions to support leadership and partnerships to improve ethical space in the sector, support Indigenous leadership, develop a steering committee to help guide implementation of the strategy and ensure targeted and effective actions, engage with diverse sectors, and prioritize policies for seed specs for restoration and innovative contracting mechanisms that can allow for better forecasting and communication. Develop financial support and incentives to support the people doing this work, and tools for certification and labeling, tracking, and training. So next steps for the sauce. The draft is actively being circulated. We're integrating feedback from working groups and other partners to make sure that this is the strategy that everyone, believes in and wants to stand behind, and that we haven't missed anything. We also really want to ensure that we maintain that two-eyed seeing lens throughout the whole strategy. So next steps include to launch and share broadly this spring. We've had many discussions around the implementation phase and are looking forward to moving to this next phase of the sauce. We've identified a need for strong leadership and implementation, and continue to work together as a collective to carry the momentum of this group and shift to that implementation phase. Carolinian Canada is committed to the implementation of the sauce, continue to work together as a collective to keep this momentum going and make positive impacts quickly to scale seed in an ethical manner. And of course, ongoing efforts toward fundraising and partnership building to support this work into the future. This process would not have been possible without the partners involved, the collective members, all the guests who participated in our collective meetings in that process, and the resources developed and shared across the landscape. And of course, the willingness to work together, share stories and expertise, and thanks to our funders, which Siobhan will thank as we wrap up this meeting. And on this note, I will turn it over to her to talk about the Southern Ontario Seed Saver tool.
Thanks, Jen. So just to close our presentation, I want to chat a bit about a cool resource that we've kind of developed out of the Southern Ontario Seed Strategy work. So you can go to that slide. Yep. So we've developed a bunch of resources kind of to build a community of Native seed savers, and to create some public-facing opportunities as well for folks relating to this work. So I'm going to speak more to the Southern Ontario Seed Saver tool, but we also launched a native plant newsletter to connect our work with native plant growers, different events, and other opportunities for folks on a regular basis, and to share stories around connecting to land. And then the Seed Saver videos refer to a series that Stefan Weber led the development of. And these are Seed Saver training videos that feature a lot of amazing partners in this work. And those are available on our website and our YouTube channel. And then, of course, we have our Economy of Hope report out that I spoke to earlier. So the Seed Saver tool, as I mentioned, it's an online module and survey designed to connect people with a native seed community, and also to allow us to identify different opportunities for seed orchards and for capacity building. So we launched this in the spring of 2023, and we've received 26 responses, and we're planning ways to engage with this cohort of participants further and connect them with different training opportunities and networking opportunities as well in the sector. So we had our first networking event in the fall of 2023, and we're planning future sessions with the group as well. And in the module, in the Seed Saver tool, we explore different topics, including the participants, the different knowledge and experience that they hold, about the plants that they're planting, the properties and sites, truth and reconciliation, tracking seed chain of custody, and building connections. So this slide is about the goals of the Seed Saver tool, which include learning about seed orchards and collection areas, exploring wise practices, connecting with the seed saving community, connecting with resources and opportunities, identifying existing seed orchards and opportunities for new projects or expanding existing projects, and then also fostering this group to build capacity. So of all the findings that we've kind of collected from the Seed Saver tool, I've just pulled some highlights to share in a couple slides. So far we've identified 372 hectares of land total. And individual properties vary in size, but about half of the participants have between 100 and 1,000 meters squared that they could commit to seed orchard activities. And 19% have at least 1,000 meters squared or 1 hectare. 50% of participants either have a seed orchard already and want to expand, or are in the planning stage of a seed orchard. And 42% don't currently grow seed orchards, but are interested in learning more. And over 2/3 are in a learning phase with regards to truth and reconciliation in their work, which shows a critical gap that we are planning to help address. And so over half the participants say they grow between 50 to 100% native plants. And this can include culturally significant and rare plants and species at risk as well. And about half of the participants reported that 50 to 100% of their native plants came from known populations. The majority of participants, though, don't keep chain of custody records or need more information about this topic. And just one participant currently uses an established tracking system. So this shows another key gap that we could be addressing. And we also thought it'd be interesting to see how participants were distributing their seeds. So nearly half of them distribute at a local scale, about 1/3 at a hyperlocal neighborhood scale, and just a couple at the regional scale. And in the table to the right, you can see that the majority of participants are just growing native seeds and plants for personal use or to just share closely. But less participants in this group are selling seed or integrating their activities into a broader market or supply chain. So that's something that we can help folks work towards and help connect them with training and networking opportunities that are aligning with the SOS implementation as well. And finally, there's a strong interest among participants in sharing knowledge, with many interested in being a teacher or a mentor. So I should have mentioned that a lot of the participants that have submitted the tool, they are actively doing this work. They have a lot of expertise, but some people are also just starting to learn about these topics and learning about native seed and seed orchards. So we're hoping to amplify the folks that have the knowledge and experience that they would like to share, and the wise practices that they'd like to share, and provide a platform for them to help mentor other folks to begin who might just be getting started. And so for connections, we asked participants about the different connections that they're interested in, and there was a strong interest in establishing and expanding connections and relationships with others in this work. Also learning about seeds and seed orchards in a network, and also being open to receive compensation for allowing seed collection on their properties. So in summary, this tool has established a small group of people with strong potential for native seed saving work at different scales and levels, but who collectively have a large area of land that has potential for seed orchard opportunities. And this tool is also available on our website, and it's always open. So we kind of have this first cohort, but we're accepting applications all the time. And I should have put a link on the slide, but it's just on our SOS website. So caroliniancanada.ca/seed, and you'll find it there. And yeah, we've also identified some critical gaps through this Seed Saver tool as well, that we aim to address through different networking sessions and webinars and training, including integrating truth and reconciliation into all of our work, tracking seed chain of custody, and following recognized standards related to ethical and ecological seed saving. So yeah, just to conclude, I'd like to recognize and appreciate all the support that we've received from the Greenbelt Foundation, from Environment Climate Change Canada, and the Canadian Wildlife Federation as well, that have been really essential to all the projects and the work that we spoke about today, including the Economy of Hope report, the Southern Ontario Seed Strategy, and the Seed Saver tool as well. So yeah, thanks for listening. And also a big thanks to Reforest London for having us today and putting this conference together. And yeah, we can take questions now, or also feel free to email the contact on the screen, seed@carolinian.org, if you have any questions or want to connect with us on any of these things.
And if I could say, just in wrap up, following Siobhan, we will be publishing the draft this spring. We are going to do a lot of outreach at our upcoming expo. If you remember the Go Wild, Grow Wild expo from pre-pandemic days, we're going to be holding that once again. Hopefully the sauce will be already out there. If it's not, it's going to be coming soon. So we're going to be out there just as busy talking about the seed strategy, talking about seeds and native plants. So if you are interested in being a part of that conversation or just getting updates on what's going on, feel free to email that email. We can add you to the distribution list. Even if you just want to passively be kept informed, we can connect with you in that way or in any other way that serves you. So like Siobhan said, thank you again so much for having us today.
Thanks so much for being here. It was really great to see your presentation and to see all the work that's gone into this really extensive and thorough process. And I think it's really exciting to see. I have a question here in the chat. Great to see the engagement of the broader network. Thanks for bringing everyone together for this collaborative effort. The question is, do you folks plan to act as facilitators to ensure the right species are being planted for capacity building, or how do you see that working to ensure we have the right species and quantities needed to meet demand?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's one we're still trying to answer. And this is the perfect time for us to be asking these questions as we have been just really collecting information. We've been having so many conversations, and we are going to be kind of answering those in the implementation phase. So we do plan to carry this process forward. We've asked all the partners and the folks that were a part of that collective if they would like to be involved going forward and in what way. So we're going to be developing, like I said, a steering committee and some subcommittees to help make decisions like this and making sure that the right folks are on those decision-making panels and groups so that we can get some more recommendations and really kind of streamline activity coming out of all the knowledge that we've been collecting.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you. There's a logistical question here about where to find the Economy of Hope report on the website. If that's something that you want to drop in the chat, the link to that, that might be helpful for our participants. I'm not seeing any other. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, I didn't want to cut you off. I can definitely do that link.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you. All right, so another question. Does the SAUCE Seed Saver tool know or capture data on which species have seed orchards, as you noted? Are they primarily herbaceous species of mixed provenances?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in the Seed Saver tool, sorry, I'm just going to post my Economy of Hope, or maybe I didn't send that to the right chat, but anyways, I'll send it.
No, it's okay. I can forward that on this. All good. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so in the Seed Saver tool, we do ask a question about what people are planting, just generally. So native species, culturally significant species, rare species, species at risk, and non-native species or other, but we don't go into species specific. But that is something that we can, like following people submitting the tool, we are having networking sessions and we're bringing these folks together to talk through different topics and just network with each other generally. So we're kind of noting down the different things that are popping up in these discussions and seeing if we can have sessions to address these things in the future as well. So,
and like Siobhan said, a group has really been formed out of that Seed Saver tool from the respondents who have participated, where they can get more personal when however it feels comfortable to them, really kind of get to know each other. We've had some virtual meetings and we plan to stay connected with that group. So if you think that you might fit that profile of someone who maybe produces some seed or is interested in producing some seed, we encourage you to submit that module and get your name on that list. And maybe you'll find some opportunities to participate and connect with other folks doing that same work and learn from each other.
Yeah, I think that's great. I have a question. I don't see any more in the chat right now or in the Q&A, but to our attendees, feel free to pop more questions in there. I think that there's an impressive reach to this program. What exactly are the bounds of it in Ontario? How far does this seed strategy stretch? And what is in store for you in the coming year?
Well, it's the Southern Ontario Seed Strategy, and us being, a regional organization with Carolinian Canada, we're often kind of, within and beyond the boundaries. So I think it's going to have an impact that's even greater. We've been working with the folks who are developing the national seed strategy. So it's certainly centered on Southern Ontario, and the folks involved are from within Southern Ontario. Not really sure where that ends. I'm sure if I looked at a map, I could kind of differentiate who is on the other side of the line and who is on the inside of the line. But I mean, nature knows no bounds. So it's a strategy for our unique ecology here in the most southern end of the zone. And yeah, I think what's coming up in the next year is, like we said, just the strategy finally coming out. We're scrambling, as you can imagine, to just really get it as perfect as we can, but it will be a living document. Once it's out there in the world, it belongs to all of us in Southern Ontario. So it's not done. It's something we can continue talking about, but our main focus will be sharing, doing some outreach that it's out there, and connecting on that implementation phase. What should we do next? Which of these actions should we prioritize? Kind of mapping out the way that it's going to play out, because native plants are becoming more popular. Maybe 10, 20 years ago, more people wouldn't even know what a native plant is. They wouldn't have been so integrated in, some of the work in the region. And so we're really trying to kind of capitalize on that and really shape the way things play out, rather than letting things just grow however they grow. We want to really make sure that we have Indigenous leadership, Indigenous participation, two-eyed seeing, and that it develops in an ethical way. So we're trying from the beginning to have a hand in that, not us at Carolinian Canada, but all of us who are already involved in this kind of work.
Definitely, yeah. Well, it'll be hopefully a very successful year, and it's super exciting, and probably, like you said, hectic leading up to to this formal launch. But again, even if it is a work in progress, I think there's endless value in even in this presentation, being able to share that information with people. Just a side note in the chat, not a question, maybe a caveat to add that the strategy was not intended to cover trees. Just finding the native plant term leads some folks to think it includes trees. That's from Kristen.
Thanks, Kristen. Yeah, trying to steer the conversation to herbaceous species has been tricky, because trees have been so popular. Even with Earth Day coming up, everyone wants to plant trees. Everyone already loves trees. So definitely the focus has been on the herbaceous species, which also has the greatest biodiversity.
Definitely, yeah. I think, and Melissa says trees are plants too, which is very true. So I think moving in. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So I think that probably concludes our Q&A, as there's no more questions right now. But again, I really, really appreciate both of you being here today to share the important work that you're doing, and to be able to give us a little bit of insight into what's coming up with Carolinian Canada and the sauce. All right, yeah. So I'll let you go then. Thank you so much again for your presentation.
Thanks,
And,
Thanks so much, Rachel.
Thanks.